ADHD rumination and overthinking. So first off, I mean, it's normal. And so who here, if you feel comfortable, put your hand up. Who here has been caught in some kind of rumination or overthinking before? Yeah, it's everybody. It's really common. Yeah, negative self-talk, can't stop. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that this can manifest. And the first thing I like you to know is this is so normal. If you experience it, basically all of us do. If you don't, let me know. But as far as I know, everybody that I've heard with neurodivergence can experience this, some varying degrees, and it's really normal. And there are some things that you can do about it too. So I'm going to talk about just some common things that can trigger rumination. I'll go over that really briefly. And then I want to talk about stimming versus ruminating, because we can actually stim with our mind. And there's some other things with that. So I want to talk about how to know the difference, because stimming and ruminating are two different things. And then I'm going to share why we're more prone to rumination with ADHD and overthinking. And then I'm going to talk to you about what doesn't work. And then I'm going to talk to you about what does work. So that's the agenda for today. And then depending on time, I might share like scenarios where I've overthought and kind of walk you through the process. So I'm going to get through the content and bullet points as efficiently as I can. We'll see what the timing looks like. So first off, I mean, rumination, what is that? You know, there's a line between you're just thinking or you're kind of stuck on something versus really ruminating. Ruminating, you know, there's a lot of definitions as when it's not helpful anymore. You know, we have 10 times the amount of thoughts as someone without ADHD. We're going to think a lot. We are. And when you're stuck on one thing, sometimes us staying with one thing, and this is part of the good thing about ADHD, is we can problem solve. We can stay with problems. We can hyper focus on them a long time. It's like a puzzle. We can figure it out. Now, ruminating, I would put in a different category. Ruminating is where it's not productive. You're stuck. You don't want to be stuck. You're not getting anywhere. It's not a problem that needs to be solved or could be solved. And you're stuck, right? It's like you can't let go of it. That's really the definition of rumination for this call. So it's not helpful. It's not progressing. You're stuck. And it can be triggered by all kinds of things. And you might have different patterns. Just some examples. Feeling rejected, that can cause rumination. What did I say? Did I miss a social cue? Did I overshare? I've done that too. What could I do differently? If you have anxiety, rumination and overthinking is, for a lot of people, our brain's way of trying to protect us or trying to predict something or trying to avoid pain. And so it's not just this part of our brain that's trying to hurt us or harm us, as you'll learn as we do a lot of this, and especially with my mental health background, a lot of times our brain is trying to help us. Sometimes it's not always the best route. But that's initially the intention, minus if substance abuse, or I mean, it tries to help us numb out stuff or whatever. But for the most part, it's trying to help us even if it's not the best route. So other things like making a mistake, we can be perfectionists. If there's a big decision, something that feels, or there's got a lot of decisions and you keep circling, somebody questioning your integrity or your values or accusing you of something that isn't you. If you're burnt out or you're tired, it could just be a habit. There's a lot of things. So there's just so many different ways that this can come up. Now, I want to talk about, before we go into some other stuff, stimming versus rumination. So stimming is something we've talked about before. This is something that our brain does because with ADHD, a lot of times we're understimulated. And so our brain stimming, what that is it could be, you're, fidgeting with something. These are some fidget toys I have. You could be fidgeting with something. You could be singing a song over and over again, or a phrase. You could be bouncing up and down, repetitive movements. So this is your brain saying, hey, I'm understimulated. Let me do non-harmful things to then stimulate the brain so I can stay focused, because it's going to produce dopamine. So stimming is really helpful. That's why kids in school should be allowed to stim and not just sit there and internalize all their anxiety. And for people that have suppressed their stimming, what you'll find is when you allow yourself to stim or move, your anxiety might get better versus just forcing yourself to sit. Another thing that's kind of interesting, and this is if you have autism as well, I mean, there's a lot of overlap with ADHD and autism. There's something called echolalia. And what that is, it's more predominant with autism. It's the repetition of speech. It could be a saying. You might repeat something that was said over and over again on the TV, or something said, or just a saying. And so that is a form of stimming. I wouldn't count that in the rumination. Again, it's kind of getting us somewhere helpful versus somewhere we're stuck and it's like, I can't stop doing this. Why can't I do this, right? So I don't want to confuse stimming, which is our brain really trying to help us, with rumination, which might be a pattern that's not as helpful. So why are we with ADHD more prone to rumination? So one, with neurodivergence, we have a strong sense of social justice. Okay, so if somebody does something wrong out of integrity, they don't follow the rules that actually make sense. A lot of us, if the rules don't make sense, we're going to, maybe not follow them. If they do make sense, we're really going to follow. We're going to question those. I did tell my dogs to be quiet. Okay, so if the rules do really make sense, if they're valid, we're going to really want to follow those. We're going to have high integrity. We're going to be good with people, all of that stuff. So strong sense of social justice. If something is wrong or somebody's violated core values or something, we're going to be more likely to ruminate on that and be upset about it. Then we have what's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Anybody heard of that before? So rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Okay, so what that is, it's this extreme form of rejection, right? Where we can assume negative, we can assume that somebody's thinking, even if it's neutral, and so that rejection sensitivity dysphoria can make us ruminate, even if it's something that wasn't rejection, even if somebody said something to us and we think it's rejection, we can ruminate and try to Okay, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and we might even predict, like we're used to, especially if sometimes social cues maybe struggle with those, right? You might try to overthink stuff to predict the scenario or practice or rehearse what you're going to say, those kinds of things. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And then also, like, we don't always trust ourselves in our decisions. So we get 20,000 negative messages about our behavior by the age of 8. That's with ADHD. Why are you late? Why did you forget this? Why did you do it that way? No, that's not the right thing, right? So we can have trouble trusting ourselves. And so when we have a big decision coming up or something happened, instead of believing ourselves, we're going to potentially, overthink and try to think what we did wrong, things like that. So overthinking. Another thing is that might have helped us mask. If we can predict the future or compensate for missing certain things or being different, it might be a coping skill that actually helped you as you were growing up to try to overthink and avoid getting in trouble and what should I do here and what did I do here. So it could be something that at one point when you had to mask and you couldn't be out with your neurodivergence and just let go, you might have needed that. You might have been scolded as a kid. People didn't get it. Another thing is we can forget things. So rumination, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody or friend or a client or something, and you forget the details about something and they say something that's not true, but you can't really back it up. So again, we can get really in our heads. Trauma. So here's another reason why we might be prone to rumination. So it's familiar. A lot of us have trauma with the way our brains are designed and the fact that we take in more stimulus and we can be more sensitive to certain things. Trauma might affect us at a higher level. There's stats around how we're more likely to have trauma, and no, trauma doesn't cause ADHD at all. We are more likely to have trauma though with how our brain develops. And so think of, if you're used to trauma and chaos and stress, and then all of a sudden things are calm, that can feel really uncomfortable. So sometimes our brains can even like try to make us comfortable by creating trauma, by overthinking, by making us stress. And also we have lower dopamine levels. And so when you have a thought or you're overthinking and it doesn't feel good, it's very compelling. It creates cortisol, it creates dopamine. And so our brains can kind of be giving ourselves natural dopamine. So again, I don't need to shame yourself or think what's wrong with me if you're ruminating. It could be so many different things. We can almost, they've shown too, we can almost sometimes get addicted to negative thoughts because happy ones aren't compelling. Happy ones don't have this huge surge of dopamine that creates pain, that's cortisol and all this stuff. And so if you're really low on dopamine or you're burned out and your dopamine's just depleted, sometimes we can go in that pattern. Black and white thinking. We are prone to black and white thinking, all or nothing. It's terrible. It's going to be horrible, or it's going to be great. So I better really figure out how to make it be great, because it's either going to be perfect or not. So we can really do that versus like, hey, it's going to be good enough. And then intrusive thoughts. So those are more common with ADHD, and these are thoughts we don't actually want to happen. This could be some type of self-harm. It could be, like any kind of, running your car off the road, like any of these things that you don't want that feel really scary. And you think, why is this coming from my head? Those can be intrusive thoughts. And that doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you want to do those things. It could be that it's just intrusive thoughts, which everyone has, by the way. I've talked to non-ADHD friends that felt comfortable enough to share that because nobody talks about it. But with us, it's a little bit more frequent. And then so I've got a whole list. You can see, right? This is why a lot of us have rumination. Like it's normal. So we'll go through some of the techniques. So then a couple other things. We can be people pleasers, right? We're trying to predict things. We want to please people. We have 10 times of the amount of thoughts someone without ADHD. And then there's a big correlation between ADHD and OCD. So they don't have firm numbers on that, but they are finding a correlation. Now, here's the thing. Most people with OCD, like when you think of OCD, think of like hand washing or checking doorknobs or checking the stove if you turn the stove off, right? That's the stigma with OCD. And there's another form of OCD that's more likely with ADHD called pure O. So you could have a messy house. You could leave the door unlocked. You could not care about the stove. What pure O is it's completely cognitive. So instead of compulsively checking things, you're compulsively thinking and ruminating on things over and over and over again. So again, I'm not saying everybody here has OCD. I'm saying I do, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But 20% of people who have OCD have the pure O version, and it often gets really undiagnosed. And it's kind of like you're constantly trying to figure out this puzzle in your head of these scenarios over and over again, almost where you feel sick. So again, you could have that not have OCD, but it does add an extra layer with the OCD. So those are just some reasons why it's more common for us. Now I'm going to talk about like what doesn't. And tell me, or raise your hand if you've tried these. So who's tried replacing a bad thought with a good thought? Has anybody tried that before? Okay, so sometimes they teach. So that's like one of the first things in OCD therapy that they say, do not do that, because it's actually another form of compulsion. And I tried it too. Replacing a good thought with a bad thought, what you'll find in this list of what doesn't work, it's similar to if, have you ever been to the beach or seen like a beach ball, that inflatable one, and you go and you go in the water with it, and you try to push under the water, and you have to hold it down. The second you move your hands, it pops back up. That's what this list is. So replacing a good thought with a bad thought, guess what? Great. Now you have a full-time job, and now you're going to do that over and over and over again. And it's a beach ball that keeps popping up. So replacing a good thought with a bad thought is actually a compulsion that they teach in OCD therapy. That's just another type of compulsion. Another one, this may work for you. It depends on the rumination. It also may fall in the camp of replacing a bad thought with a good thought. And that is making a gratitude list. And you might be surprised by this, right? Like making a gratitude list. If you're doing it to cover up something you don't want to feel that you're stuck on and you're trying to avoid it, for some people, that's the same as replacing a good thought with a bad thought. For other people, it depends on where you're coming from. For other people, if you're worried about safety or things, making a list of why you are safe instead of replacing with a good thought, that might be helpful. So again, have discernment on that. Where it's not this Band-Aid you're slapping on that you're going to have to do over and over again. We really want to find a sustainable way of tools that you have that can help calm this. Because I'll tell you, my OCD with the OCD therapy and some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, it's like, 85% better than it was, which I didn't know was possible. So another thing, talking to the same people over and over again about the same scenario over and over again, you're not solution seeking, but it's just to keep talking about it because it's giving this dopamine hit. It's getting this cortisol, something like that. You'll notice we had somebody in the group who brought it up and asked for help. That's a different thing. That was brilliant. Somebody said, hey, I'm stuck on this. I'm ruminating. That's very different. Somebody's saying, hey, help. Like, what are some tools? But if you're going to somebody and you're just talking about the same scenario over and over and over again, and you're actually not trying to move through it, then that might be more of rumination. Um, Getting mad at yourself, like, gosh, why can't I stop thinking about this? What's wrong with me? Like, why can't I just get over it? Gosh, what the heck? Or just get over it, man. Just get over it. Like, let it go. This is stuff that typically does not work for people. And then what I would say too is, as like the biggest one, is resistance. So this is the key, and it'll kind of transition us into some of the tools you can use. Is when you have tons of resistance to whatever's coming up from you, sometimes what you get is more of that thing coming up from you. What I mean by that is, it's kind of like the replacing a good thought with a bad thought. Like, oh God, I'm ruminating again, or I'm overthinking again. I got to go do something. Like, oh, stop thinking. What's wrong with you? Stop. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to distract myself. Like, stop. That is something that can just kind of perpetuate things and keep it going. And so we want to watch for this resistance, because I'm going to teach you, there's a couple different techniques from specialists I'm going to talk to you about. What I want to start out with, and this was for me with my OCD therapy, which is, essentially a lot of rumination, is the kids on the bus technique. So here's an example. If you have part of you that's just, it's like you've recognized as rumination. It's not helpful anymore, and it's just over and over again repeating the same thing, and you can't get away from it. And so what you do is you imagine like you're driving a bus, right? And that voice, or if you have a couple, they're all kids on a bus, and they can sit right next to you. So instead of saying, stop it, and you slap them and you try to be mean, it's like, you can sit here, you can't drive. So you can sit here, I'm going to hold the space for you. That's fine. I'm going to hear you, but I'm driving. So you kind of separate yourself from the thought, and you allow it to be there. For some people with severe OCD, this is the only thing they can do. There's nothing that can make those repetitive thoughts go away. And they have self-harm repetitive thoughts. They have like, like, oh, I'm going to get addicted to something. It's stuff that's not true. And they just live with it. And what happens is, even those people that have repetitive thoughts like that, and it might even be, like every couple minutes, their entire life, they come to a place of peace. And it's like background noise. And it just sits there all the time, and it's eventually it's not as loud. So if you can kind of visualize, this voice being part of you, but not, like a piece of you, but not the same person, or a kid on the bus, right? Whatever that looks like, and let them sit next to you, and let them just be there. But you're driving, so you're not pushing them away, you're not fighting them, but you're also not like listening to it and believing it. Because that is really, for a lot of us, recognizing we're overthinking or ruminating is really helpful, because then we can say, oh, I'm ruminating. We have a name for it, versus I've got to figure this out. I've got to solve this thing. I can't do anything. I got to think about this all the time until I solve this, So another thing, when we're looking at rumination or overthinking, sometimes it might be about something we're avoiding. So for example, and I'll share something like, when I got my AC installed on my RV, and the guy said he was licensed and he wasn't, and it fell off within 8 hours while I was on the ADHD tour, and it went under the RV and like broke, and I spent thousands of dollars, and then he blocked me. It was nice, and he blocked me and disappeared. I ruminated on that for a long time. I was very frustrated. I was mad, but it was to the point where it was like too much, right? So when you're thinking about something and it feels like, okay, this is too much, this isn't necessarily appropriate for the scenario. What can happen sometimes is there's something there that you're not feeling. So something that you're not feeling. So for example, in that scenario, like if you're upset about a situation and you're just not moving forward, is there something underlying that represents something else that you're actually upset about? So for example, the thing that actually stopped that for me was, there was a feeling of sadness. I thought it was anger, which can be a secondary emotion sometimes. There's a feeling of sadness because of, it's somebody that I trusted that lied. And for a lot of us with neurodivergence, we tell the truth. We want to help people. We do the right thing. And there's this naivety in me that believes everybody else is like that. And it was kind of this moment of grieving that I need to have discernment, and not everybody's always going to help. And it was like this, I don't know if this makes sense. It was like this grieving of not everybody's like really pure and wants to help. And maybe that's a little bit of me being on the spectrum, like we can miss red flags. But once I started to feel that and grieve that, the rumination left. So it wasn't really that I was this, I mean, I was angry, but I wasn't angry where it would last for 3 weeks. I couldn't get off of it. It was like once I found the real thing that it was, that it represented, then it kind of dissipated. So it could also be something like that. Now, especially for some of us, we can have what's called alexithymia. So what that is, it's more common on the spectrum as well, is we have a difficulty identifying and feeling our feelings. So there's like a disconnect. It's harder to identify that. And so sometimes we try to think through our feelings because it takes practice to identify what the feeling is. I think this is just human nature, right? This isn't, I don't think all of us have been taught to feel our feelings and hold space for that. I think that's just normal too. And sometimes it's a little bit harder to identify our feelings, or we try to think through our feelings. And if we could sit and hold space and feel the feelings from that, instead of just trying to think and really get in our heart or in our bodies, then that can be something that can help kind of move us forward. So it might be that the other question, yeah, so basically to sum it up is like, is there a feeling in this that I haven't felt yet? And do I need to feel it? Am I scared to feel this feeling? Because again, we can go to our heads when we don't want to be in our body or our heart. So that's something else. So another thing you can do, if you're stuck, you might give yourself time limits. So you might set a timer and say, okay, I'm not quite ready to stop yet, but I'm going to let myself do this for another 10 or 20 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. And then after I'm done, then I'm going to go out and do something. I'm going to get some movement. I'm going to talk to a friend. I'm going to go do a hobby. So that's another thing, is that you could set a timer instead of just, oh my gosh, I got to get out of this office. Okay, I'm going to allow this for another 10 if there's any, and see if it's productive or not. And then I'm going to, move on to something. Okay, so then let's see. So another one, this is called the dropping anchor technique. So this is a way to move through rumination, dropping anchor. So number one is you're going to acknowledge what you're thinking and nasty text from her sister. That's a great one. So you get a text, a not nice text from someone you love. So the first step is going to acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling about it, and like really hold the space for that. So we want to feel our feelings. We do it. You move through it so much faster if you let yourself feel your feelings. So acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling. I would imagine if you got a nasty text from somebody you care about, somebody you trust, then that's going to bring stuff up. So let yourself feel that. Number two is going to be to connect with your body. That's number two in dropping anchor. You're going to connect with your body. Now there's a caveat here. If you've had a lot of trauma, sometimes being in your body is kind of scary. It doesn't always feel safe. So you might connect with parts of your body that do feel safe. So if you connect with your hand, if you connect with your hair, your nose, I know for someone with trauma, this might make more sense if you can't be fully in your body, because some parts maybe don't feel safe. So that's another option. You don't have to be in the whole thing or meditate or be Zen. But you want to connect with your body and kind of ground if you can, whether it's like with your breath or just like noticing it's there. And then number three, you want to re-engage with whatever you're doing. So you're just going to go back and re-engage with whatever you're doing. So if you were working, you're going to stop. You're going to acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling, allow the space for that. Then you're going to get in your body, and then you're going to re-engage with what you're doing. And that's number three. So again, it could be that the kid's on the bus, right? It's still there. It doesn't mean you're over it, but maybe you table it right now and they sit on the bus and you drive a little. And then the other thing that they talk about with this is practice it. It might not happen the first time. When you do the dropping anchor, acknowledge what you're thinking and feeling, connect with your body, re-engage with whatever you're doing. It may not happen the first time, so just practice it, right? We're looking for a gentle, we're not looking for this huge resistance. We're looking for being a little bit more gentle with that. So some other things too that you can do is a pattern interrupt. So a pattern interrupt is different than, oh my gosh, stop thinking I'm going to replace a good thought with a bad thought. Pattern interrupt might be something that just takes your attention. You might have momentum on this thought that's just over and over again, or this thing. And when you get out of your head or you have a pattern interrupt, it can interrupt that pattern, and then it's easier. So that might be meditation for you, or some people, meditation makes it worse, right? You just are even more in your thoughts. So then you might be doing something more like compelling or engaging, like going for a walk, playing a video game, watching a movie, a TV show that you really like, talking to your friend on the phone and listening about their day or your partner's day. So different things work for different people. So it's something that is a pattern interrupt. One of the biggest things in a lot of the studies and a lot of the videos I watch is you can't think your way out of rumination. You can't think your way out of rumination. So walk, get in your body, something to get out of your head, get in your heart, dance, take a bath, like something that's self-soothing, self-care, those things. You can't think your way out of rumination. And so just remember that if you're trying to solve the puzzle or think your way out of it, then that's sometimes more rumination, right? Versus finding techniques or processes or things that work with you. And then one last thing too, if something comes up, like what's the fear? What are you afraid of? What is the core fear that you're having? And just again, acknowledging, is that true or not? And that could sometimes we can get anxiety or worry about things that actually would never happen. So again, like the more and more stuff that I read about this, different things work for different people. I watched a video on like a rumination expert. That's their thing. Different things work for different people. So try different things. So to kind of sum that up, is we really want to, acknowledge, just have self-awareness about what's going on. Know that our brain's trying to help us. Ease the resistance, and more so a gentle redirect towards what you do want. And acknowledging, get in your body. You can't really think your way out of rumination. And just, if you have to feel any feelings, sometimes just literally holding space for that, and making sure you're feeling feelings about what's really coming up, that can really disperse this. So that's my list. And my thing, I like to give you stuff that's sustainable. It's not stuff you have to do over and over again, like the beach ball. Like it's not a technique you're going to do today that's going to make it disappear and then it's going to come back, tomorrow or tonight again. So, sometimes, but that's kind of the list is really that. So that's my content. Have a great day. We'll see you on Facebook and next Tuesday.